Here in Canada, I've observed cetaceans with self-mutilation behaviour, wounds, scars and damage to their teeth. These types of injuries can be extremely graphic and are documented not only on orca but also in belugas and dolphins. Such issues arise because the animals are housed inappropriately. If you can imagine draining one of these tanks and substituting the dolphins for another animal such as a lion or even your dog, then you might begin to understand how profoundly barren and inappropriate these conditions are. It is a concrete box, nothing more. Additionally, everything involving choice is completely removed, and choice is fundamental when it comes to good animal welfare. A lack of charges and/or convictions against a facility doesn't mean that there aren't welfare issues at stake.
Ms. Visser, in the brief which you provided to this committee, you stipulated that the quality of the tanks at Marineland, among other things, constitutes a violation of basic animal welfare. Now, I'm sure you're aware that Dr. Lanny Cornell, an internationally renowned marine mammal scientist that specializes in marine mammal veterinary care, testified before this committee. In his testimony, he specifically stated that the quality of water at Marineland is some of the finest you will find in the world. In fact, he stated that it is not only cleaner than anything these cetaceans would encounter in the wild, but also that is likely cleaner than common drinking water, other than, of course, the fact that there's salt in it. Would you comment on Dr. Cornell's analysis? And in a follow-up to that, have you personally tested or examined the water quality at Marineland? Then I have one more question for you after that.
Sure. Look, I don't think anybody wants to call into question anybody else's qualifications or abilities or opinions. But the fact of the matter is that water quality is not the criteria that is the key for looking at the welfare of the animals. It's one of many things that we look at.
One that you used in your brief.
Yes, indeed, sir. I did, and amongst the 27 others that are listed by other scientists when they look at the welfare. I'm asking you about
one. Do you agree with Dr. Cornell that it is among the cleanest water around?
No, I do not, sir. I do not. I specifically saw, when I was there 3 days ago, the staff washing from a platform, pushing poop into the water and then using detergent to scrub the facilities and then washing that detergent into the water. Now, I have that on video if you would like to see that. So that's one example that I saw. I'm not given the option to go in and test those facilities for the water quality. No, sir, I haven't, but that is not the point. The point of the matter is that the facility is not up to standard. It's not good enough for these animals.
Your team at Orca Research tried to rescue an orca, which was unfortunately unsuccessful.
Yes.
Now, I have pictures here of the pool sizes at Marineland that compare to the pool size you use for this rescue, which is a little larger than the pool that my grandkids use. I've seen pictures on your website as well of this orca in this tiny, tiny swimming pool with almost no water in it.
Yes.
And yet you talk about Marineland's small pools and Vancouver Aquarium's small pools. Why would you put an orca in this small pool and try to rescue it?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Senator Plett.
So am I then.
I'm actually very pleased because I think it's an important thing to address. The situation that developed with that animal, and Senator, the Chair, may I have a moment to address this in a little bit full?
We'll give you time, and if we need to, we'll...
Thank you. The situation that developed with that animal was that it was free swimming for 21 days at least, and during that time period we were in full consultation with the government and external experts that were flowing in from overseas, and also external experts that we consulted with overseas. One of those included the head vet of the Vancouver Aquarium, who did appear here. And the consultation was made with all of them that the appropriate thing to do after 21 days of trying to get permission to intervene so that we could put the animal directly into a sea pen, and that was denied by the New Zealand government. Eventually the decision was made that the animal had to go into a temporary holding pen or a pool for a maximum of 3 days. Unfortunately, the animal had gone into terminal decline and died before that 3 days was up. But the facility that we held it in is a standard way to use a rehabilitation system, and SeaWorld itself uses exactly the same system.
And a final question, with your permission, Mr. Chair. You tell us in a document that in 2015 you made observations at Marineland, and you were allowed to watch Kiska in public spaces. Why weren't you allowed to watch Kiska throughout all the places in which it lives, throughout its entire environment?
A valid question. I was there 3 days ago, and I was actually removed from Marineland. I was threatened by the staff that they would bring in the police. I was told that I could not take photographs, and this comes only days after you yourselves have heard the experts from Marineland say that they are fully transparent and that they welcome people. And I have a photograph that I took just 3 days ago, this one here, compared to the photograph that I took in 2015 of the open wounds on the end of the tail flukes of Kiska. And this is the sort of thing that's indicative of what's going on in these places. And it might not look like a big wound, and you're correct, it's not. But the fact of the matter is it's how this wound was formed, and it's formed from these abnormal repetitive behaviours. And I'm concerned because she clearly hasn't been treated for it, or if she has been treated for it, that treatment isn't working.
So you're basically saying that Dr. Jacola is contradicting the research that, what kind of contradiction could you give us the details? What kind of other contradictions are happening?
Well, all the evidence that you see with the animals themselves, they are behaving abnormally, and that you see them either catatonic in the corner, or you see them that they are performing these abnormal repetitive behaviours that you saw, head banging, pattern swimming, all of these sorts of things that you just do not see in the wild, and that's indicative that the facility that's holding them is not appropriate.
Yeah, you could probably say you do not see them in the wild, but I mean, you haven't seen every wild animal there. It could happen, right?
Well, it has never been reported by any scientist anywhere in the world for any of the research that has been done by all the hundreds of scientists that have observed cetaceans around the world. But it is quite prevalent. In fact, I've not been to a single facility in all of the facilities I've been to around the world where I haven't seen it with cetaceans.
And I know the ocean is so big, and not every animal can be looked at, but
no, but you do see it pretty much on every single cetacean in captivity. Personally, I've seen what happens with kids in these places. I've seen them go to a show, for instance, where the animals are ridiculed. The animals they're presented in a non-educational way, and I think that when you also see the animals, even if they're just, quote unquote, swimming around in a tank, this is passive abuse in some ways. It would be the kindest way to describe it. And I don't think that that's instilling respect for these animals. I think that we all want to do good for our kids. We all, and our grandkids, we want to educate them properly, and we want to get the right information into their little absorbing minds. And if we do that by presenting them the wrong types of information, we're sending the wrong messages. And you've only got to look, for instance, at something like zoos. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all zoos, but there are some very good ones out there. And if you look at from when we were kids and you went to a zoo, the animals were in a bare concrete box, and that was it, yeah, and you saw them pacing up and down. And now you go to a zoo and you see, and there's trees, and there's grass, and there's a little stream, and there's some nice things for the animals to do, and ropes to hang on and stuff like that. But think about what you're showing your kids when you take them to see a cetacean in a concrete box. It's like when you were a kid. It's a concrete box. There's nothing in there for those animals. There's not even a fish painted on the wall. There's just nothing. And that is not the right message that we should be giving our kids.
But, Ms. Visser, despite what you say, what would you say if I said we have evidence of you taking photos at Marineland? You allege she is injured and not, Kiska is injured and not treated, yet we have heard OSPCA and others have all examined her and she is fine. I understand you did not report any of the alleged injury to Marineland. You did not complain to the OSPCA, and if you did, Marineland never heard from them. Veterinarians have seen Kiska in the last 2 days, and they say she is fine. Further to that, Ms. Visser, you participated directly in a case brought, and I have to do all of this now because the chair won't let me ask a second one. You participated directly in a case brought in California by PETA, where you were personally named as a representative for one of SeaWorld's killer whales. In that lawsuit, you alleged that killer whales were being held in slavery, which you argued was in violation to the U.S. constitutional amendment, which ended the slavery of people. The court rejected that position, and I understand you lost the suit. So my question at the end of this is, do you believe in persons' rights for whales under the Canadian law? Is that right? And what other animals do you believe should be treated the same as people under the law? Should Calgary Stampede be shut down? Should the zoos, and you mentioned trees growing in zoos, and I understand that and appreciate that. Not many trees grow even in the wild waters. In the Arctic, it's only rocks under the ocean. There's no trees growing in the Arctic, in the seas. So you're drawing comparisons, apples and oranges. So I know it's a long question, and please see if you can answer most of that.
Sure. Senator Platt, when I was referring to the trees in the zoos, I meant for animals in general. I wasn't referring to trees for cetaceans. So I think it's worth just nipping this in the bud immediately and saying that the personhood aspect that you bring up is not relevant to this bill. It's not discussed as part of the bill. It's not.
I asked you, I would like an answer to whether you believe in personhood, because I think it's relative, and so I'm asking the question.
Senator, you may ask me the question and you may attempt to bully me on the answer, but I refer again that this is not relevant to the bill, and so therefore there is no reason for me to respond to that question. Whether I believe in personhood for animals or not is irrelevant to the testimony that I'm putting forward for this bill, which is that cetaceans should not be kept in captivity.
You should run for politics with those answers.
Dr. Visser, in the criminal code amendments specifically fall within the animal cruelty section of the criminal code. So my question is a general one. Because it's a sort of a general type of offense that's being created, and that offense is that it is inherently cruel to hold cetaceans in captivity. Do you believe that?
I absolutely do, yes. And the evidence speaks for itself. And as I mentioned earlier to the other senator, you've only got to look at the behaviour of the animals to understand that. And I think it's important to put that in the framework of yes, the senators have been presented with a lot of dichotomous information, but they've also been presented with duplicitous information. It's not only that we're standing at different sides, but you're hearing different stories from some of your witnesses. And there was a witness just recently this is a testimony that I wrote down from the video streaming. He stated that I've personally removed bullets from 2 killer whales that were recently brought in from the wild. And I was horrified when I heard that. I thought, wow, where did that happen? And then later on in his testimony, he says, oh, that hasn't happened. I haven't seen that out in the wild since the 1960s. So he's giving you the information and the appearance that this is a recent issue, and then he turns around and clarifies that when he's questioned, that it's the 1960s. There are so many examples of that from many of the witnesses that are supporting the captivity industry that I find it disconcerting, and I think it's not a good reflection of how they're representing themselves or their industry.